Hey folks, welcome to the show. My name is Scott Miller. This is IT Rockstars, the podcast that helps IT businesses and managed service providers grow their business. We do that by speaking to industry experts, IT business owners, and vendors. Now on today's show, we've got a guest that's going to tell us about a bit of a missing gap you might have in your MSP. So if you're using an RMM solution for your clients, more than likely it's monitoring workstations, laptops, servers, potentially mobile devices and tablets as well. But there's actually a missing gap that a lot of us probably aren't aware of. So we've got on the show today someone that's going to show us a little bit about that and tell us about his product. But before we get into that, IT Rockstars, it wouldn't be possible without our sponsor, IT Rockstars. If you're looking to generate more qualified leads for your IT business, check out our proven formula at itrockstars.net. Okay, so on today's show, we've got Steve Petryschuk. He is the Systems Engineer Director, or Director of Systems Engineering at Auvik Networks. Now, Steve, first question out the door. Before you got started at Auvik, give us a little bit of background to your sort of history, your IT career or your networking career.
Sure. So I started off really out of the gate as a sales rep at a security VAR. My background is in engineering. I'm a technical person. I grew up, playing with computers and everything. But really, first foray into the networking world was as a salesperson, which was a little bit of a surprise for a technical background. But yeah, it gave me the opportunity to really understand how large enterprises and small mid-sized businesses really manage a network infrastructure, and seeing it at it from a security lens. Jumping over into Auvik, I sort of applied that day to day to help understand how we can improve network management, network monitoring, but I always sort of have that security flair backside as well.
Okay, so what type of sales were you doing?
So it was software and hardware sales focused on security solutions. So think firewall vendors, privileged account management, IPS, NAC, those type things.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I believe you've got some slides that we're going to go over. Or you want to share your screen?
Yeah. But why don't we do that? I mean, before I jump too deep into it, I want to sort of first share a bit of a story. And the reason that we're really talking about this today is because, for a long time, there's been this gap in how service providers manage their clients' environments. And that's really about the network management, right? And we've all sort of been there when we had that situation where the network goes down or the internet goes down. And what do you see? Like, we have video here, so I'll sort of animate it. You see like heads popping up out of the cubicles going, hey, is your internet down? Is your internet down, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that we've become really reliant on this network link. And I've had one of those situations where I literally, drive into work in the morning, internet's down. So what do? You go back, you drive back home, or you pop up your wireless hotspot, but you lose a ton of time and a ton of productivity. And it's, it's because we're so reliant on this network asset that's sort of become that glue that holds everything together.
Yeah, I even back before everything was cloud, I had the business that I sort of operated in at the time. We were running remote desktop and Citrix. So even though back 15 years ago when internet that wasn't as prevalent, this organization needed that connection to be up all the time. So even back then, it's been important personally for myself, and I know what can happen there when there's outages.
Well, exactly. So the large enterprise for a long time has had that, and now it's becoming more and more prevalent in the SMBs that most IT service providers work with. So I'll jump into it a bit, basically to introduce who we are. So Scott mentioned earlier, my name is Steve. I work with Auvik here. So what we are is we are network management for managed service providers. We sort of are 100% channel focused. We're headquartered in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. I always drop a quick sorry joke in there, but you never quite get the right reaction. Canadians always say sorry, so sorry, I'm Canadian. I get a smile at least from you.
Sorry, you're Canadian. Is that a thing? Is it?
Yeah. Apparently, we say sorry a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apologize. That's definitely not that's not a good sales tactic to apologize about anything. You take
exactly.
power there.
So we basically, we have 190 plus employees. I think it's actually 200 plus employees now. It looks like I'm using an old version of the deck. Over 2,000 partners. And this little mascot here is our polar bear mascot named Nanook. So he's basically just means polar bear in the Inuit language. But yeah, that's his name there.
What is with the polar bear actually? You're in network monitoring. What's the polar bear about?
Good question. So basically, we've gone with a bit of an Arctic theme where Auvik is actually a building block of ice that's used to build an igloo. And so going with that Arctic theme, igloos, polar bears.
Okay, I
Yeah,
see.
yeah, exactly. We mentioned it already, like, today we sort of identified that the network is something that service providers tend to not have full visibility into. But the reality is that the clients don't know that, right? Like the clients don't worry about their networks. They don't, phone you and say, "Hey, my network's running perfectly, everything's great," because they've hired you as the service provider to sort of provide this network management capability. You're sort of that complete all-in-one service, and you're doing a great job at the endpoints. But basically, that network is becoming more and more important because it is the gateway to everything that they need, right? You've got the network covered. You've moved all of their infrastructure from sort of on-prem servers, on-prem services. You moved up to your private cloud, up to a public cloud, or they're using SaaS applications. But either way, we've moved their application such that I'm no longer working on, Microsoft Word on my laptop. I'm now working in Google Docs or Office 365 up in the cloud. And now the network is that gateway to everything that I need. My client data is up there, my applications are up there, and it's become pretty critical. And so if if you've got the network covered, the client focuses on their business. They're happy. Everyone, is working. Everyone's productive. But as soon as something happens, right? This is that sense of frustration I was talking about earlier. The network's down. What do I do? What am I going to do about that? They're really focused on your business, and that's not a good sign, right? So basically, I'm going to dive into sort of three vendor agnostic things here to begin with, just to sort of set the stage for what should we be doing on the network to make sure that we do own the client's network, that we do have visibility into there, and we can address problems before they happen.
Okay, so
And
that proactive piece.
yeah, exactly. And so that's exactly the first one, is knowing before your client, right?
Mm-hmm.
So good visual here to really have some insight into across all the client networks, know what's out there, know what devices are running, know what firmware versions they're running, know how things are configured, how they're connected, what devices are online, know when changes occur. If we use that internet example earlier, I don't want my client calling me to say, "Hey, my internet's down." I want to be calling the client to say, "Hey, I noticed that your internet was down. These are the steps that we're taking to do something about it." Although that's not 100% proactive, you're at least getting there before your client, and it's definitely a far step ahead from answering the phone on the other end and have your client yelling at you, right?
Okay.
So number two is about providing strategic guidance, and again, we're going to start with sort of the same basics here. It's knowing what's out there, knowing how it's connected, how it's configured, knowing what devices are, what firmware versions they're running, how they're performing. If as IT providers, we need to elevate ourselves away from just being the computer guy or the IT guy, right? It's about providing that strategic guidance. And I'm sure you've had other vendors, that have talked about this on your show, and maybe other guest speakers as well. But it's really about elevating the conversation away from, "Hey, you need to replace this because I need to sell you this new firewall or this new switch." But it's, look, you've grown from 20 people to 30 people or 20 people to 100 people. The network that you had back then is not the same network as what you need today. Or if you're planning to do that growth, how do we ensure that we're growing the network infrastructure with you?
Yeah.
Getting visibility into what's out there is the first step.
Okay, so it's all about having that sort of resilience in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And third is about managing network risk, right? So we can be as proactive and provide all the guidance that we want, but ultimately, there are things that are going to happen. So it's understanding what we do about that when something happens. The lightning striker is a good example. There's flood examples from many different regions of the world where basically, if doesn't matter how much planning we do, eventually there will be something that we didn't plan for, right?
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that once that does happen, we're in a position to recover from that? And so why don't we all do it? And it's really because they're hard. We were chatting a little bit before we hit the record button about being, more, mouse jockeys instead of CLI people. And that's really the reality here, is that, network management is very manual. There's a lot of command line interfaces, not a lot of web-based GUIs. It's a lot of manual configuration. It's not like, Windows environment.
It's something that I've always attempted to avoid at all costs, or
Sure.
get someone else to do.
Yep. I'm in the same camp, right? I've toyed around with it a bit, but I'd rather get a job done in 5 minutes rather than spending an hour remembering how to use the command line.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the other piece of that is that there's no standards, right? So you think about a Windows environment, how many versions of Windows are there, right? There's, from Windows 3.1 to, Windows 10 here, and there's a few different server workstation versions, but really, the major functionality, you can sort of count the major versions on a couple of hands.
Yeah.
With networking, like how many vendors are there? Then how many firmware versions for each vendor? And there really aren't standards on how to interact with all these devices.
So off the top of your head, Steve, how many vendors does your product work with?
So we've identified over 15,000 unique devices and 700 different vendors that we have interacted with.
Okay, I didn't think there was that many.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so. There's definitely a few that come out of the woodworks. So
okay.
as you see one off here and there. And so the other part of the challenge is that, we're not all networking experts. And we kind of addressed that earlier where, we don't want to be all on the command line all the time. And the reality is that when it comes to networking issues, more often than not, it's our most senior techs or our most expensive resources that end up being the ones that handle these network infrastructure problems because they have the experience and the know-how on how to manage the network infrastructure. So that's really where it comes down to.
Yep.
And that's, where Auvik comes in. How are we going to do that? I would like to suggest that we look at Auvik to help solve some of those problems.
Okay, so that's where the sort of the gap is then, and this is where you come in. This is where the Auvik solution comes in. It's funny actually. Where I heard about Auvik was actually on the Frankly MSP podcast, and it's Jennifer Tribe. I mean, I was on her show just recently, and I've always kind of known that Auvik have something to do with networking, but this was actually the reason that I've had you on the show today, is because I didn't really know what the product was and what the problem was that you're solving. So I think you can answer the first part of that is, what is the problem that you're solving, and that is the resilience of the network. That's what it sounds like to myself. So I'm assuming this is the main dashboard that we're seeing here now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, that's what we're doing and what we're going to try and do for you.
Okay.
Now I think we should dive into a little bit of the how, right? So what does it look like and how we interact with it? And so, the first thing we talked about was getting visibility into the network, understanding what's out there. And so that's really the first stage of rolling out Auvik into your MSP practice, is just understanding what kinds of devices are deployed, what firmware versions are devices running, how are things connected and configured. So what we're really looking at here is like up-to-date topology maps. And if we highlight some of these links, what it's actually showing me is port-to-port connectivity. So when you get that call that, hey, the network's slow or the internet's slow from a specific user or a specific device, I can quickly, search this map because it's done the discovery. I can find a device here and see exactly where they're physically connected. Here's Ian's device connected into gig E1032 on that HP switch. Traditionally I'd have to figure out, well, what is his IP address? What MAC addresses does that map to? Maybe search for some MAC forwarding tables. Now I'm getting really into the technical depths that, I don't want to do.
Yeah. Okay. Does this give you, would it give you the bandwidth allocation that Steve's using as well? Or if there was a problem user, would it highlight, Joe's chewing up all the bandwidth?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll dive into that in a bit. We're sort of talk about a little bit of the alerting and sort of some of those proactive things you get notifications about. But ultimately, those show up on the map in terms of visualization. So you can picture one of these blue lines. If there's a problem, they're going to turn red or yellow, or depending on the severity of that problem. So I can get a visual indication that something's wrong. Yeah, so I mean, the mapping's first sort of the first really big thing that we really dive into, and I don't want to jump over it too quickly, because this is where a lot of value is derived, and that people would spend a lot of time doing Visio diagrams, documents in the network. There's real time that's being used to do that. If you're not diagramming the network or documents in the network, then there's a gap there that you can definitely help fill in an automated fashion.
Okay, so can this dashboard here, this map, can this be? I noticed you've got an export button there. Does that export out to a few things? Okay, PDF.
Yeah. So we can export it as a PDF. A lot of our partners like to include this in like a quarterly business review, where they'll actually bring up that dashboard and sort of talk to the network with their clients. Or if they do a network assessment once a quarter, they'll do an export of the map at that point. Okay. And of course, it's all filterable and searchable. So if I want to look at only network devices or something like that, I can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess taking the next step down and diving into one of the devices, like to sort of extend that visibility discussion, I talked a little bit about getting some visibility into what sorts of devices are deployed, what firmware versions are running, are they up to date? And so we have a lot of that built in here as I dive down to a device dashboard, where I can actually highlight things like serial numbers and in some cases recommended software versions, so I can see that I'm actually a couple of versions behind on this device and I should be updating. More importantly, this device is out of warranty coverage and the warranty ended about a year ago. This is definitely something that I need to action.
Okay, that's very handy to have that warranty information. I like that. So that kind of ties back to the vendor's API and checks the stats against the serial number, I guess.
Exactly, yeah.
Nice.
So, I mean, the way that we collect data, we're sort of agnostic. You can see here on our dashboard that we have some green check marks beside SNMP and login saying, hey, I'm collecting SNMP data. I'm logging into this device. In this case, I think it's via SSH. But, ideally, we don't need to necessarily know how it's collecting the data. The point is that Auvik is just, hey, we've discovered the device, you've given us some credentials, and now we've automatically discovered all this information and are reporting on that and managing that device.
Okay.
So to sort of support some of that network troubleshooting scenario we talked about as well, like when the network is slow or the network is down, we do track a lot of device performance stats over time. So what's the device bandwidth and utilization? And a lot of that is feeding into those alerts you were talking about earlier. So if I want to know, hey, Ian's using a lot of bandwidth, we can quickly go back and see, well, did I get an alert from his device or his interface, right? And to sort of extend on that, we also have net flow visibility, which I'll sort of launch our traffic insights dashboard here, to help understand not just how much traffic is passing, but actually what that traffic is. So now when I get, that call from a user, I'll focus primarily on the device where a lot of our user traffic is passing. I can start to ask questions of how the network is being used, not just how much, right?
Okay.
So if I wanted to focus in on, what a specific user is doing or what those top conversations are, I can pivot on that data to really see, who those top conversations are. I can apply searches and filters to help understand where it's going. You can see there's a lot of Apple traffic here in our network. We're a network of Macs, so that's not too surprising.
Okay.
The fact that Reddit makes our top 10, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, okay. How much work are you doing?
Exactly. It's not me. I mean, if I wanted to, I could dive in to figure that out.
Okay.
But as well, I can start to ask questions like, are there applications that maybe shouldn't be in use? Here I can see there's a lot of Dropbox traffic on my network. Is this an approved application?
Yeah.
In this case it is, but I can quickly see, again, who that is and where they're going. The little piece of eye candy that a lot of our partners like to include in sort of that quarterly business review is one of these geolocation graphs to show their customers where the traffic's going. So what are all the different areas that the specific user or client is talking to? Traffic going to Russia? Should I be concerned? That's really a decision you get to make, but you can start to get visibility into where that traffic is going.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Steve, I guess a quick one here.
Sure.
Real life scenarios then. What's the best story that you've heard of, one of your clients using Auvik and how it's helped them? Do you have any examples of that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So focusing just primarily on what we just talked about, we've had a few stories come back just over the past couple of weeks on this traffic insights component. We had one partner who had noticed some communication to one country and one region of the world, which I won't say name any names.
Yeah, Scotland maybe, huh?
Yeah, it must have been Scotland, yeah. But basically, they saw some communications in there, and they sort of said, well, like, why is that happening? So, to pick on a specific country here, I will do that within my dashboard here.
Okay.
But they were able to track down and say, well, what devices are communicating into that? In this case, it was actually, they narrowed it down to one specific IoT device that was communicating outbound to, a country that really the company had no business dealing with.
Okay.
It ended up not being super malicious traffic. It was, but it was good eye opening to say, well, there's a lot more traffic going on than what we would expect.
I see. Okay, so it's just having that sort of awareness of actually what's going on in the network.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, you get those network is slow complaints pretty regularly, right? And so being able to drill in on that time period and see, well, what exactly is happening? How is the network being used during that time? Then I can better answer the question, well, who is it? Where are they going? So to sort of extend that down, right? You get a call if things are slow over the lunch hour, drill into that noon period, see who the top users are, right? Pivot into that top end data.
Okay.
And then I can pivot back to the Auvik map.
I can see how that would be really useful because I'm dealing with a client at the moment actually, and they're running a certain type of laptop. I won't say what the brand is, but
sure,
they're not that. They're questionable in regards to their quality on the network ports. But I do get a few complaints every other week of the internet's running really slow, Scott. What can we do about it? So I'm always thinking in my head, is it your device or is it actually the network? So I guess this tool would be able to tell me.
Absolutely. So it's going to start to narrow down, is it external? Is it something like the internet provider? Is it the internal network? Is it the endpoint? We can start to help isolate some of those things.
Okay, excellent. The other piece on the proactive side of things, Steve, you mentioned something like the internet goes down, or there's a lightning strike or something like that, and your firewall screwed, for example.
Yeah.
Does the Auvik solution, does it include any type of backup of configs or anything like that within it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the, I would say, the core competencies that we help a lot of partners automate. I think it's long been known that it's best practice to back up network devices, but traditionally it's not something that I would say a lot of partners actively do, or at least do on a regular basis.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I've had a partner who sort of came to me and said, we just spent, I was showing him this backup functionality, and before I dive into it to sort of share the story, they had just spent 5 hours the previous day actually backing up, or sorry, reconfiguring a switch that had sort of had a power supply die and went down, and they didn't have a backup. So there's 5 hours of the day that's spent reconfiguring it. Ultimately, when they did reconfigure it, they actually still got a whole bunch of alerts out of Auvik saying that there's a whole bunch of packet discard alerts, and they had reconfigured it wrong, right? So even that 5 hours spent was a little bit in vain.
Okay, so this is where your solution could have come in, and you would have had the config file here ready to load, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. So we have, the most previous one, this one's currently running, so I can't restore it, but I could, export it, take an offline backup. Or I would say the more common scenario is you're looking and saying something changed, right? It used to work yesterday, it doesn't work today. What changed within the network? So being able to quickly see and navigate side by side. Oh, look, someone changed the HTTP server here on this device. Why? In this case, we're just capturing that difference. I can then go into Auvik to see, well, who was logged into the device during that time via our audit log. But we're capturing all those changes and quickly highlight what changed.
Okay, I like that feature, because that's always the first question that I always ask when in my head. When there's a problem, I always ask, well, what's changed? So,
Right. Well, so I guess to pivot on that, to be a little bit more on the proactive side, I'll jump in and sort of dive into the alerts for a second. But that's one of the things that we actually can alert on right out of the box, right? If we look for configuration backup, anytime that there's a new configuration change detected, we're going to back that up. And you can get alerted on that and send that into your PSA or into your ticketing system, so you know about it exactly when it happens.
okay.
And this is something that it is one of those things that just enabled out of the box. Don't have to do any sort of setup to get it working and running. I know I am focusing a lot on Cisco devices here as well. And we did talk a little bit earlier about how there's a number of hundreds of different vendors that we do see and support. So this is obviously true for anything that I can programmatically back up or programmatically log into. So things like, I'm not going to go down and name a whole list of vendors, but there's a bunch of devices on my network here. A lot more.
Okay.
A lot more vendors as well. So quickly, like the last step is that, so we've gone through that process. We've said, hey, something's changed. The configuration on the firewall has changed, or maybe nothing has changed, but I need to make that change. The next step is obviously, well, how do I go in and make changes to that device or do additional configuration? And so we can do that from directly in the application as well. So the old process being, having to log into a jump server, track down the device credentials. Maybe, I don't have the credentials, but someone else does. I have to go ask where they are and where to find them. But here now I can quickly use this remote terminal function and have it actually proxy that connection to the device without having to go down and find any credentials. So using my Auvik credentials, it says, hey, is it still Steve that's actually interacting with the dashboard? It is me, and it'll pass me directly into that device where now I can go and make changes.
Into the browser. Okay, I like that.
Yeah. So no additional software or anything needed. It makes it pretty straightforward. And same thing for things managed via web browser, right? So think about we talked earlier about not wanting to be on a CLI. So if something like a Sonic Wall that I manage via browser, I can also do that directly from within the application. Yeah,
that's neat. I like that. Okay, yeah. So the service itself, does it sit on a server on premise, or how, is there an agent that you have to install somewhere?
Good question. So the majority of this is cloud-based, right? So most of what we're seeing here, we're interacting with the Auvik cloud. We are hosted within AWS. We do have data centers globally, so within different regions of the world. We leverage what we call a collector, and it's one small piece of software that goes on one device within the network. So if you think of an endpoint RMM that has to be on every single endpoint it's managing, that's not us, right? We just need one collector, one agent that acts as our local point of presence and then does the discovery across all the devices. So it's using things we talked about earlier, like SNMP and SSH to interact with these devices from one local collector.
Okay, can you have more than one collector?
You can, yeah. There's definitely lots of options. I would say the most common deployment is one collector for one customer.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you have a customer with multiple geographic locations, maybe you'll have one in each location. Or if you have different areas of the network that can't talk to each other, or you want high availability, those are all.
Yeah, I'm thinking more of the high availability if if that server goes down or something like
Right.
that.
That never happens. Yeah.
that's the reason I asked that question. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any? I mean, there's obviously quite a lot to this dashboard to go through. We kind of said probably about half an hour for this overview.
Yeah.
Is there anything sort of anything else you want to cover within here that we've maybe not got to yet?
So a couple of the big things that I like to sort of bring up with our partners is that as much as we try not to introduce more workload into your current processes, your current systems, right? A lot of people think, hey, I'm getting a new tool. It's going to take a lot of work to get it set up. To put it bluntly, there's not zero setup, right? You do have to deploy the collector, you do have to add in some credentials, but ultimately, like a lot of these things we talked about, alerting, this kind of thing is pre-built out of the box, right? So I don't have to go in and set up all my alerts, figure out what I want to monitor. These are all set up based on industry best practices, and so it's basically set up running out of the gate. The other piece I did want to cover off on is a little bit about our multi-tenanted architecture. And so coming up to our MSP dashboard here, you can sort of see that we do support a multi-client setup. Definitely lends well to most of our service provider partner setups where they have multiple clients they're managing. And from here, I can do things like manage integrations into your existing systems. So back to that point about integrating into your current workflows, if you're a ConnectWise or an Autotask user, we're not giving you another source of alerts, another source of information. We're going to feed that directly into those platforms. Documentation platforms like IT Glue and Passportal Docs, we talk about that discovery and getting that information. We can populate all that into the existing systems you're already using so that ultimately you're not coming for another source of truth. It's all about integrating into the existing MSP tool stack.
I see. Okay. And you mentioned that point on MSPs. So for example, me as an IT manager that doesn't have an MSP, I've got my own team. Can I still get a hold of Auvik, or is it MSP? Are they the distributors of it? How does that work?
So we do distribute both through MSPs and through VAR partners. So our primary market is managed service providers. We do have a lot of, I would say, corporate IT clients that buy through VARs that we have in different regions of the world. Ultimately, we do a very granular user management. So if you do have a service provider who's providing, say, some level of service for you, but not complete managed services, they can also deploy it on your network and give you access to just your environment or just what you need to see. So it is pretty granular.
Okay, I can see how this kind of sits alongside what managed service provided in that whole RMM solution that they've got as well. So I guess that's almost like my next question to this is maybe, okay, you've got a few, you've got your existing client base and you're really interested in taking on the Auvik product into your sort of suite of tools. You're obviously going to have to bring that up with clients because there's a cost associated with it. How would you go about that? Your quarterly business technology review or account meeting. How would you bring up that conversation on this product?
Yeah, so I would say, I guess I would challenge you a bit on the fact that we have to bring this up and resell it on to our customers, right? Okay. It's definitely something that a lot of our partners look at as an efficiency and an operational tool for themselves. Right? A lot of the value that we talked about today was really driving internal value for the MSP. Automated configuration backups. I don't have to have someone doing that. Reduced troubleshooting time. All of a sudden, I can have my most valuable resources doing the most valuable work, whether that be project-based or proactive work, right? I'm giving visibility to those level 1 techs to see how things are connected and configured to make it much easier and quicker to solve those problems. So there's a lot of value derived as an internal efficiency tool.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, having said that, we do have some partners that look to say, well, how do I then monetize this, right?
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
Exactly. we're not in business to make friends. We're here to make money, right? So, I mean, friends come along with it. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we do, anytime we introduce an additional cost to the business, there has to be either revenue generated for it or money saved from it. So as much as, we have a lot of partners that do the money save, we do have a lot of partners that try and generate revenue. A lot of them, they focus on a sort of an add-on managed network service. So they have their core service offering today, which might have a, hey, we manage your network line item, but they do then upsell their customers with a managed network service offering that would include, more proactive work, where it's one of those difficult conversations to have, where it's, we talked about earlier, like, aren't you already doing this? Aren't you managing my network already, right? But the
Yeah.
reality is that, the tools have changed that allow us to manage the network. The importance of the network has also changed. So building in that bundled managed network service on top of the core managed services offering is the way a lot of our partners are going.
I see. It almost sounds as though it's the type of thing you bring up at the right time, like when there's maybe a network outage or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if every customer had that network outage, then that would be ideal. But oftentimes you don't want to wait until that happens, right? So.
Well, exactly. And I can totally see how it's more of an efficiency saving for the MSP more than anything else. So I can see how that would almost be the priority with this. It does seem to lend itself to having that overview of where things are on the network. And that was always, spend spend a whole morning round around an office looking at the networks, trying to figure out where the problem is. This I can see would save a lot of time for a lot of the MSPs.
Yeah, it comes down to if we can save an on-site visitor too, there we go, right? Like that's, the truck rolls are sort of the killer to most service provider business. If you have to put someone on the road, chews up a lot of time. So if we can save a truck roll or two, then most of the time it makes financial sense for our partners.
Okay, so this is probably a little bit of a challenging question for you, Steve.
Sure.
Actually, what is the most challenging question you get when you're in front of an MSP showing them this product and they're maybe hesitant to buy it or have an excuse why they don't really want it? What's your kind of answer to that?
What would be the most challenging question that we get?
Yeah. Or reason that I don't want to go Auvik. Well,
yeah.
Why? Because it seems logical to me.
Sure, I would say it actually. What you mentioned about the a sell to versus sell through discussion is one that often comes up during that process, right? Like, is it something that I should look at as a service provider as an efficiency tool, or is it something that I go out and generate a new service or new revenue off of? And that is probably up there in terms of the top questions that we get.
Okay.
But ultimately, most of our partners will then sort of coach them through the process and say, like, look, for the most part, they may not know how much time they're spending doing configuration backups, or are they even doing them? They may not know how much time they're spending doing a Visio diagram or onboarding a new client. And so it's just understanding if we can save time in 2 or 3 of those spots, and what is the value of that time.
Okay, yeah. So it's almost like they've currently got the break fix mentality for their network, whereas they've got the managed service part for the IT infrastructure, and it's convincing them of that. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, Steve. This is the last question I've got for you, and that is the licensing model on this. Is it a per device based license? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's basically licensed based on the number of network infrastructure devices that we manage and monitor. So within Auvik, those 4 device types are routers, switches, firewalls. Because we are focused on the network infrastructure, I am only billing for those type devices. So you can see here I'm discovering things like phones and workstations, and monitoring things like UPSs and hypervisors. But it's only like core network infrastructure, routers, switches, firewalls that are billable. And then based on your total monthly spend within Auvik, based on those total number of network devices, there's different volume tiers that break down what the specific price per device or price per network is. I'll say on average it works out to be between about $40 to $60 per end client. So depending on the size and complexity of those clients, that's a rough guideline.
Okay, and that's per month, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Is there any questions that I've maybe not asked you that you'd like to sort of bring up here?
Where do I sign up? No, what's the next steps? Where do I sign?
Well, that was kind of why I was asking, if there's maybe someone not using an MSP. But yeah, where do we sign up, Steve? Do we just get in touch with yourself?
Yeah, so yeah, email me. More than happy to email me. I'm Steve at auvik.com if there are any questions. But if you jump to our website, which apparently is slow to load right now, there's definitely a lot more information that's on there, and there's a couple of calls to action. We do free trials, so we do a 2-week free trial if it's something that you're interested in doing, and that's both for managed service providers and corporate IT folks. So we'll get you set up with a VAR partner in your region if you are corporate IT, and then once you sort of request that trial, you can run it for a couple of weeks and see if you like what you see.
Excellent. Okay, well, that's it. That's a wrap then. It was really great to have you on the show, Steve. Thanks for your time. I was a little bit reluctant to be doing a vendor sort of demonstration about networking because it's a total gray area to me. As I said, I avoid
Sure.
all possibilities. I'm a Meraki guy. I'll pay the extra money for Meraki just so I can use the mouse on it. But it was great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
As I mentioned, folks, IT rock stars, if you are looking to generate more qualified leads, grow your business, check out itrockstars.net. We've got a proven formula that's going to generate leads for you online. Check out itrockstars.net. You get a 1-month free trial of our service. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, guys. Bye.